that share button, everyone. Hit that share button. Say Word is back.
Hey, ladies.
Hello, Say Word family. Get your share on. Get your share on, family. Do us a big, huge favor. This is our once a month. It's not a first Monday.
It's a month.
It's a month event, and it's
a third Monday. It's a third Monday.
It's a third Monday. Hit that share button. Everyone tag folks. This is going to be the conversation that you need to hear. I'm so excited. We have the doctors in the house. So you know we have our Dr. Nikki. Oh wait, this way. Dr. Nikki. The other way, Candace. But now we have Dr. Yola. Let me tell you something. I watch her updates every week. She is amazing, amazing, amazing. She's so multifaceted. But this is exciting because she has all the information that we need. And we have Dr. Julius, who is on the front line, and he's going to talk about his experience getting COVID while working on the front line. And, you know, it's just real out there. So family, you hit the share button because we're going to get right into the topic. We're going to get right into everything, but we want to make sure that you're in the place, seated, get your questions ready because
get those questions ready.
Listen, she's going to give us all the answers that we need to the best of her ability, to the best of what she knows. I see Gwen on. I see Anna on. Listen, everybody, hit that share button, tag. We see the numbers coming up. Tag. As a matter of fact, I'm hitting my share button. Hit that share button. We're going to be talking about COVID. We're going to talk about these vaccines. We're going to be talking about the process of where we're at, if we're taking it, and if we've already done it. And, you know, our purpose. Oh, Keisha's in the house all the way from New York. Tasha, how you doing? Hit that share button, everyone. Hit that share button.
Yes, everybody. Hit that share button.
Tag some folks.
Share it.
I don't know who's on with me on YouTube, but there are a couple of people on here, and I'm like,
hey, YouTube.
Hi, YouTube family.
Hey, YouTube. Love our YouTube family.
YouTube, you can also share. It's a share arrow. Also, if you're on, hit the subscribe button. But once you hit that share button, you can copy that link and send it out in a text to your family and friends. So I'm really excited. So the topic that we're going to be talking about is a topic that everyone is affected. It's a world. It's a world topic. And so if you want to start it off, I have some clips, but before we get the conversation going, I would like to bring in our expert of the evening, one of our experts. You know, when you got doctors in the house, Candace, we don't got the DR by our name.
Yeah, girl.
Y'all are too much.
But listen, hi Marquise. I just want to say hi Brenda. How you doing? Listen, hit that share button because I want to make sure that everybody gets this information. Did you guys share?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Sharing is caring.
Sharing is caring.
Yeah, sharing.
Okay.
So Dr. Julius, I believe, is on.
Dr. Julius, he's on.
Yes,
hi, Dr. Julius.
Marquise, right?
Yes.
Marquise.
Yes.
Yeah,
how you doing?
Hey, ladies.
Hey. Make sure you hit that share button. Hit that share button. Because we are going to bring in, because we can't, I don't think anything in this topic tonight, this conversation, we need all hands on deck. And we need the conversation to be full.
Absolutely.
Yes. So before we get started with us playing, I'm going to play some clips. You know, we're going to talk about what's going on. But Candace, please introduce our guest of the night.
Yes. So Dr. Yolandra Hancock,
Yes.
we like to refer to her as Dr. Yola, is a
Yes.
much sought after pediatrician and licensed health and wellness practitioner who combines her hands-on clinical experience and public policy health expertise with her passion for building vibrant families and communities by providing patient empowering best-in-class health and wellness care to children and adolescent youth who are fighting childhood obesity. She also has a Facebook page, Jackie, as you mentioned, that she provides updates for COVID-19 every day. So we would love to welcome Dr. Yola.
Dr. Yola, I'm so excited.
Yola.
Let's drum roll, it's coming, Dr. Yola, are you ready?
Dr.
Yola's
Yola.
Hi,
Welcome,
Dr.
welcome,
Yola.
welcome.
This is Dr. Yola, that's Dr.
Welcome.
Nikki. This is, we know each other from one of your many talents and skill sets that you have. That's through Zumba.
Wow.
And so, Dr. Yola, I have been watching you every week, giving us updates. First of all, I don't know what you have in your cup, but I feel like I want some. I'm like, are you not sharing your cup of tea? I'm like, the way you talk and the way you drink it, it's like, what does she have in that cup? It makes me want to go get a cup of tea.
I just finished my cup of tea.
Listen, and you give us on time numbers and everything. So before I over talk, I would love for you to introduce yourself. Candace, thank you for that wonderful introduction. But please let us know a little bit about who you are and, why you've been giving of yourself weekly to keep us updated.
Absolutely. First and foremost, I want to just thank you personally and you collectively for inviting me into this space. I think when sisters get together, there's just something magical that happens. My first and most important job is that of mother. I have an 8-year-old little one who is the joy of my life. Yes. I'm also an obesity specialist, but I always like to consider myself more so a nutrition specialist because my goal is to really navigate people through first preventing, then managing diseases through nutrition, behavior modification, and really some good old-fashioned accountability. My other hat is that of a public health expert. So I've worked in the public health space for over a decade now. I'm a professor at the Milken Institute of Public Health at the George Washington University, where I get to raise up the next generation of public health practitioners. And my goal throughout this pandemic was really to sort of be the medical whisperer, the public health whisperer, if you will, in navigating us collectively through this pandemic. I think it's important for people to have a clear understanding of, one, the science behind all the stuff we talked about. What I found in the midst of the pandemic is that there's a lot of information coming at us like drinking from a fire. And I want to sort of be that filter that sort of allows the flow of information to flow through slowly, but in a way that everyone can fully understand it. To meet people where they are. If you're concerned about whatever the thing is, right? You've gotten that inbox message about COVID coming from monkeys or whatever the myth or mistruth in some cases may be. I like to also make sure I address those things in a way that's still respectful of those who may believe some of that information, just to create a space for dialogue and trustworthy and truthful updates.
Yes. Now, Dr. Yola, I hear some chipping out, and I want to make sure that everyone gets to hear you clear. I don't know what that is. Do you happen to have a headphone by any chance or anything there clear? Okay, so I'm going to start playing the clip. We have Dr. Julius on, and we want to get right into that. But before then, I want to play something that I found to be interesting to kind of tie all of this in. So let's take a look at this clip.
Life during COVID feels like we've pressed pause, and it won't start again until
we have a safe and effective vaccine.
The vaccine
that is safe and effective.
But even when that time comes, many people won't take it.
I have plans not to get a COVID vaccine.
You can't buy a good immune system.
I would never put a vaccine into my body.
Period.
Which we're about to take a look at now of the first vaccinations in New York. 2 Northwell Health employees have volunteered to be the first to be vaccinated. One is Yves Durousseau, chair of emergency medicine at Lenox Hill, and I believe this is Sandra Lindsay at Long Island Jewish Medical Center.
So with that,
I'm ready. Let's do this.
Here are 3 people who share different perspectives. Some say they're anti-vax, others are just skeptical. Take Holly Bade. She owns a holistic healing practice in Marin. Her reasoning is personal.
Both of my children had vaccine damage, and it wasn't necessarily that they died on the spot, but they both had clear changes in their health.
Then there's Joseph Jacks. Tell me why you're concerned.
6 words: testing, 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 and more testing. It's important, if you're going to put something into your body, that it's absolutely and totally tested.
And is it higher?
And if you ask Dana Ullman, he says he's not anti-vax, but concerned pharmaceutical companies are putting speed over safety.
I'm not anti-vaccine. But when they're doing studies now where they're not testing it against a real placebo, that's a way of hiding what safety is involved.
50% of Americans say they won't get a COVID vaccine, even if it was affordable and widely available, according to an AP poll taken in late May. And 7 out of 10 worry about safety.
I think before I would put my own endorsement on a vaccine or vaccines for COVID, I'd want to see the data too. I totally agree with them.
Stanford pediatrician Dr. Yvonne Maldonado specializes in infectious diseases. She's currently working with the CDC on potential COVID vaccines.
April 23rd was the first patient dosed in the trial. And here we are already on December 14th.
Go back and look at the literature of when this started. People were just comparing, saying, listen, if mumps took 4 years, this could take a very, very long time. That's why I regard it as miraculous. I know that there are a lot of people who are very cynical and already have reasons why they wouldn't take it. Those are people who are going to get COVID because this thing is all around us. I cannot believe, David, how many people I know right now in the town that I live in who have COVID. And it is very, very concerning. And I think a lot of people feel that way. And so this is a race. And we need everybody to take this thing.
Yeah, that was a great thing to watch.
Wasn't it?
Even though I don't like needles, it was great to watch.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I think that's the temperature of what's happening in the world. You have some people who are like, I will never take this thing. Some people who were like, you need to take it. And so I just wanted to know you guys' thoughts on the clip.
Well, I first wanted to start off by saying I don't know if anyone saw today that there's reports that we have now reached officially over 500,000 cases.
Well, yes.
Yes. Yeah, that was
Yola, I mean, you've been given, I think
500,000 deaths. Half a million people have died.
Half a million people, yes. Today, as officially today, correct, Dr. Yola?
No, I think it happened on Saturday.
So
was it Saturday?
Actually, exactly, depending on which data source you use, some data sources reported as early as last week that we had reached the 500,000 threshold. But this weekend, it was widely accepted that we had crossed the 500,000 threshold.
And so, you know, I've seeing an influx of people having the opportunity to take the vaccine, the first line workers and elderly, and but there's a lot of people who've been scared and who have decided that they wanted, and then you have some people in the middle who are still trying to decide what to do. I personally have children and that are slated to go back to school. So I'm right now, as of today, but things move and change. I'm deciding to keep them home, right? And so, but they actually need to be out there socializing and getting the experiences that we got growing up. And so, what do you say to somebody who is undecided? And I'll just to say that I didn't get the vaccine yet. Candace, did you get the vaccine yet?
No, not yet.
Nikki,
did you get the vaccine already?
Dr. Nikki got
Both.
the vaccine.
Yep, first and second shot. I got that already.
And so
I'm gonna be honest. In the beginning, I was kind of leery, but after doing my own research, I decided it was the best thing for me and my family, and also for my coworkers. And it's not just about me. I was also thinking about other people as well too. So that's why I decided to get the vaccine. But go ahead.
Yes. Dr. Yola, your thoughts on how you can guide somebody at least to the information of taking the vaccine. I know it's a personal choice, of course, until they make it mandatory. But can you share some of the experiences? I just love watching you, so I know some of the updates. But I don't know. It changes day to day, so I don't know. I would love for you to tell your story.
Right. So the first thing that I would say is I acknowledge everyone in the position in which they sit, right, in terms of their approach to the vaccine. I have my own approach. I've been very transparent about how I have approached the COVID-19 vaccine. I have not yet received it, but I always tell folks it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. And for me, it's about data, right? I'm a big numbers person. And in science, a standard sample size is 10%. So whenever you're doing a study, you want 10% of a population to do whatever it is you're studying. Right now in the United States, over 10% of us have received at least a single dose of one of the COVID-19 vaccines, and a little over 5% of us have received both doses. So my threshold, my benchmark is that when we receive collectively 10% of us receive both doses of the COVID-19 vaccine, and then I can go to the VAERS, which is the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, or the independent V-Safe system where consumers, citizens, get to report out their considered to be side effects. When I can look at that and compare the side effect profile of the vaccines, whether it be Guillain-Barré, which is a neurological disorder that can happen, almost an autoimmune issue, that your body attacks its own myelin and causes nerve issues, at least temporarily for most people. Bell's palsy, which is partial paralysis of the face. There's something called immune thrombocytopenic purpura, ITP, which is the body attacking its own platelets, which leads to problems with clotting, and you can actually bleed out. Those are a couple of things we've heard about in terms of this vaccine. And then we all likely know about the allergic response that some people are experiencing. And so as I'm looking through the data and reading the numbers, I'm looking at each of these relatively significant manifestations in the vaccinated population and comparing that to the general population. And clearly I have more knowledge because I know how often people develop Guillain-Barré, right? But that's why I show up every Wednesday to talk about in the general population, this is how many people get Guillain-Barré per 1 million people. In the vaccinated population, this is how many people get X in over 1 million, right? Because the denominator is key. You want to compare apples to apples, not apples to eggplants. So those are the ways in which I do it. And then the third thing is looking at death, right? Because that's ultimately death and long-term concerns are what people are most wanting to know about, because no one wants to get a shot and then you end up in, like we've heard about a sister who died in Virginia in the parking lot just, a little bit after getting the COVID-19 vaccine. So it's looking at death associated with receiving the vaccine, and is it just a correlation, meaning it was just the timing of it, or is it causation, meaning the vaccine somehow caused this person's death? And usually we're seeing that with allergic responses or severe allergic reaction. And again, you think about what's happening in the general population compared to what's happening in the vaccinated population. And when you look at something as critical as death rates, right? We know with COVID, because it's an issue of risk and benefit. And that's the other. So I look at the sample size, I look at the side effect profile, and then what the last thing that I look at is death rate in terms of how many people might be, because the media is going to report out every single time somebody dies when they had a COVID vaccine a day ago, an hour ago, 2 months ago. Is, oh, you know, she got a COVID vaccine 6 months ago, because they want to talk about the 40-something million people who've gotten the COVID-19 vaccine and were completely fine with it. And so I look at the death rate. The death rate in people who've received the vaccine is like 0.0007%.
Oh, Dr. Yola has cut out on us. All right, and it was getting good too. All right, so we're gonna have Dr. Yola come back, and it's good to get these numbers. It's important for us to have these numbers so that we can make a sound decision. Frank says, "Thank you, Dr. Yola, for breaking it down." I see there were some comments that were in the chat, and so I know I don't know if Nikki or Candace, you want to.
Yes, I would like to say hello, Claudia and Lucille. Hello, ladies. Good to see you guys.
Hey.
Yes. All right. So Dr. Yola's back on. All right. Yes. Dr. Yola, it was getting good too. Breaking it down.
It was getting really good.
Look, I don't even know where I stopped. There was a pause, and I was like, "Wait a minute."
No, you kept on going. We kept on hearing you, and then it clicked out. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So yeah, the most like I said before, the most critical thing that people are looking at is death rates, because that's what we hear in the media. And when you compare the death rate, and I say that as if people who die in correlation with getting the vaccine, even if the vaccine was the cause of death, the death rate is 0.0007% compared to COVID death rates at close to 2%. Right now, we're at about 1.6% of individuals who acquire COVID-19 dying from it. What we also know is that we are disproportionately, African Americans are disproportionately reflected in that close to 2%. We have 3 times the likelihood of dying from COVID-19 than our white counterparts. But we're also the most hesitant when it comes to getting the vaccine, and for a variety of well-justified reasons. And so when people are hesitant about getting the vaccine, I don't poo-poo them. I don't argue it, because I fully understand it. I am in that watch and wait group myself. I commend those of you who have jumped in and gotten the vaccine, because you've weighed the risks and benefits. It now allows those of us who convert, including myself, to be able to count you as our heroes and stepping up, getting the vaccine. And now we who were really in the back corner, like, how's she? Okay, she good. Let me go on and go back to right.
That's what we do. We're like,
as a physician, willingly being able to say, hey, I haven't jumped on board and consumed the Kool-Aid just because we're in the midst of a pandemic. But I also realize that I sit in a position of privilege compared to our frontline workers, right? I'm a frontline, but in the periphery. I get to decide when I see patients as a private practice owner, how many patients I see, what patients I see, and then I can equip myself. I don't have to rely on a system to bring me PPE. And when my PPE runs out, then that means I have to either convert to virtual visits or we have to wait. But I get to choose my level of interaction and engagement and my level of risk. For some of us, we don't have that same privilege. If we have to show back up at work, if we're taking care of an elderly parent, if we have chronic diseases ourselves, that may facilitate us getting the vaccine sooner. And wherever you are in the space, my whole recommendation is to stay informed, stay updated, and stay connected so that you can work through whatever questions and concerns you have.
Right, I agree.
Right, and it's interesting that you said that. Yeah, because I also saw another study saying that COVID has decreased the life expectancy by 1 year for Caucasians and other races, but they said that the life expectancy of Black population has declined by 2.7 years, and that came from just in the first half of 2020. So it's interesting that you say that as a community we've been the most affected, yet we do seem to be the most hesitant at the same time. And I wonder if you can speak a little bit about, do you feel that it's a lot of that is based on the lack of information, or the fact that it's some of this information that's out there is, I think it's so much for people to take in. And, some communities, they're not good with layman's terms. And, even at my job, we were talking today about stigma and cultural competency. And when, people go to doctor's offices, how, just them being embarrassed about asking questions or not having knowledge that, they don't ask. So I just
Right.
wonder if a lot of it is that people are just hesitant because they don't have the knowledge or the facts, or really understand, what's going on with the vaccine.
Absolutely. It's certainly as a black person, it's a double-edged sword, right? So we're most disproportionately impacted, but both because of some concern and hesitancy and because of a lack of access, we are the smallest population in terms of getting the vaccine. And I think it's important for us to understand that this hesitancy isn't just grounded in how the perceived rush of getting or developing this COVID-19 vaccine is. I like to make sure folks know that this mRNA technology was started 10 years ago. So although, it was named, and I consider it to be misnamed, I would never call a vaccine development program Operation Warp Speed, because it gives people a sense that you rush through some processes and skip some steps. The good news
Correct.
is that mRNA vaccine technology started being developed 10 years ago with Zika, where we couldn't
Mhm.
travel to all the sexy countries like Brazil and the Caribbean, especially if you were of conception age, because there was a risk for birth defects. And so mRNA
Right.
technology has been worked on since HIV. HIV is just such a tricky virus; it's hard to create a vaccine for it. But for rabies, for Zika, all of these things we've heard before, mRNA vaccine technology has been started. It's just attention, focus, and funding was committed specifically to COVID so that we could get a
Mm,
preventative measure to save the economy and to save lives. And so I think it's important for people to understand where we are with that. The second, to your point, and I think it's a brilliant one, is that whole cultural relevancy within science and within medicine. Black folks have a reason to question the system. And it isn't just Tuskegee syphilis, knowing there was a cure, but it's what happened yesterday. It's what's happening today. We just lost a doctor back in January, Dr. Susan Cooper, to COVID while she was advocating for her life in the
In
hospital
the
being
hospital.
treated. They were
Yeah.
not treating her right. She was
No.
advocating for the right care. And eventually she was transferred over, but it was too late. And she still succumbed to COVID because of racism and implicit bias, right? And so when you see stories like that happening every single day, we're well within our rights to question, which is why it's important
right.
to have platforms such as this to be able to have this conversation and to not belittle people. If they're hesitant, if they read something and they believe it, don't make them feel stupid because they believe
No.
something you don't. Just talk through it. I was just asked about mask safety last week, and the woman said, well, masks trap carbon dioxide and impair your immune system. Now, as a physician, as a scientist, I could have easily like, what are you talking about? No, instead I said, sis, let's talk through it for a second. As a physician, I wear an N95 mask sometimes 12 hours a day and can still
Mhm.
think through things, and I have asthma. So I'm still able to manage through. And so it's just talking us through what some of the things are that we've heard about it, but it's also working in the healthcare system to get us as physicians, as nurses, as nurse practitioners, physician assistants, everyone who works in health to understand
Yes.
why we feel the way we feel, and for us to
Absolutely.
train ourselves and the next generations of healthcare professionals after us to address the bias and the racism that has
Absolutely.
perpetuated since the beginning, really since the beginning of this country, and how we've treated people of
Yes.
African descent.
Correct. As
Yes.
Lucille says, it could also be because of past tests conducted on the African American population. I completely agree. I do see the hesitancy in our community, but I also looked at different reasons as to why I should take it as well, because I actually am exposed daily working with patients who
Mm-hmm.
have COVID, and having my coworkers getting COVID. I have been blessed to not be exposed. Or I shouldn't say exposed. I have been exposed, but I have not gotten COVID all this time, and it's very stressful for me to go to work every single day and have to deal with this. And I felt that this is one of the ways to make it easier on me stress wise. And also I would hate to know that I was a carrier and giving it to somebody else. And like I said, I did my research. I really thought about my family. I thought about my coworkers and especially my patients, because I work with the geriatric population, and they are very much affected by this. And that was the reason why I felt that it was important for me. I do try to help others who have questions, and I will always do that, especially my patients and friends and family, because I have friends and family. My siblings still don't even want to take the vaccine, and I'm okay with that. I mean, it's your decision, but as long as you are still doing what you need to do, masking up, not having no big gatherings, washing your hands, and staying 6 feet apart. And I try to make sure that is what they're doing. So, for instance, my niece was out the other day. I'm like, "Do you have your mask on?" I'm not playing. "Do you have your mask on?" So she was like, "Yes, Auntie, I have my mask on." But, as long as you're doing what you need to do, I'm not saying you have to take the vaccine. No, it's your choice, and I understand. But I just pray that people continue to do what they need to do, because this is not a joke. I've lost a lot of people. I've lost coworkers, family members, and I know Jackie and other people have lost friends and people who are very close to them, and it's extremely serious. It's more serious than people understand. And I just pray stay and doing what we need to do.
And speaking of that, Jack, go ahead, Jackie. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, Dr. Yola, you mentioned the mRNA. Am I saying that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I think that there's I think the understanding of nanotechnologies and this this mRNA, I think it sounds foreign to the majority of maybe your patients. And so I wanted to show a little clip, and I know you explain it very well. You also credit some other doctors for explaining it really, really well as well. I love how you do that. But I wanted to play a little clip about what that is, and even some of the myths. And I think that this might be why people are having a problem.
There are various types of vaccines, but let's take a look at the new kid on the block, mRNA vaccines. To understand how they work, let's take the COVID-19 pandemic as an example. You might have seen pictures of the virus with its distinctive spikes. These spikes allow the virus to attach to specific cells in your body and infect them. Now, here's the key idea for the COVID-19 vaccine. What if we could train our immune system to recognize these spikes by having our own bodies produce them? To do that, researchers took the virus's blueprint, its RNA, and isolated the part responsible for producing the spikes. Armed with this blueprint, they created mRNA, or messenger RNA. This is a special form of RNA that can enter your cells and give them instructions. In this case, the RNA contains instructions to build the spikes of the coronavirus. Not the virus itself, just the spikes. So mRNA vaccines contain instructions for your cells that tell them to build a part of a virus in large volumes, almost like giving them a recipe to follow. Once this is happening, your immune system kicks into action and starts learning how to attack these intruders. Again, it takes some time for the immune system to fight off these spikes, but you won't get sick because it's only the spikes, not the virus itself. And that's it. Your immune system has...
With these developments comes the ever-present technological risk of hacking. Nanotech in humans. Building new muscle with carbon nanotubes is one such possibility. Scientists at IBM are also working on using nanotechnology to analyze DNA in just minutes, instead of weeks, to treat cancer patients with a customized treatment plan. We're also seeing the use of nanotech in chemotherapy or vaccines to target specific types of cells in the body, where experimental nanosponges are being tested to absorb toxins in the body. Nanotech is also being explored as an early diagnostic tool to detect cancers and infectious diseases long before our current technology is able. Some ideas include a tiny device that gets injected into the body as a sensor or a medical delivery device. This all sounds positive, but there's a downside too. Is it secure? Tiny nano devices are typically controlled by a program on a traditional electronic device like a computer, smartphone, or server, meaning they could be very hackable. Some digital security experts posit that a single nanoparticle in the body with its own processor could be hacked. But they also say that if someone had more than one particle in the body, which many treatments would require, a hacker could theoretically turn them into a network in the body, using the body's own systems to communicate and do their bidding. One of the most obvious and dangerous applications for biomedical hacking is ransomware. If a hacker took over your inner nanotechnology devices, they could demand a ransom with fatal consequences. If you're unable or unwilling to pay, they could easily turn your body against you, and at the very least make you suffer or get sick, if not kill you. It may also be possible for unsavory characters to use nanotechnology itself against their enemies, not only in hacking attacks such as inhalable particulate powders to treat lungs. Some worry this technology could be an easily weaponized delivery method for bioterrorism efforts beyond the hacking dangers. Getting infected with something could...
Okay, so guys, I have to do it. My daughter came down in the middle of the production with a note. So I got a message that we can hear you.
You got my message?
No, please read it now or not. I'm like, go.
That's your producer right there.
Yes.
The baby producer.
The baby producer. She threw the letter at me. I'm sorry. Sometimes you gotta laugh through these things, I'm telling you. But there's a lot of people commenting. But
yes,
in those videos, you know, the explanation of nanotechnology and the mRNA and how it works, and I think it kind of reminds us of some sci-fi movie, which makes us a little bit resistant to getting something we have no idea about, and we don't want to be controlled, right? To quote unquote, the possibility.
Mm-hmm. Well, see, that's the thing. I think people have to understand in terms of the vaccine itself, there have been concerns, even with COVID, that somehow COVID was some form of nanotechnology with a microchip. And this is sort of the government, either a national or a global way for this nanochip to be introduced. And I just want to make sure everyone knows there are no nanochips in the vaccine that is being distributed either through Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca, none of that. This is all vaccine technology that we've been using since at least I've been a doctor and longer, right? We think about the polio vaccine and how it was created. Originally an oral polio vaccine where a little bit of the virus is exposed to the body and then the body mounts a response. We have now created a polio vaccine where you no longer have to have oral administration because there was the risk of actually developing polio with OPV. With this particular vaccine, as I mentioned before, the science behind it has been developed for the past 10 years. The way that I explain it is that the vaccine itself is a combination of one ingredient and a recipe for how to use that ingredient, right? So if you're making cupcakes, this is the recipe for the icing. You're not going to make the whole cupcake, meaning you're not going to have the entire virus inside the body, just one ingredient and the instructions for the icing. Once the ingredient, which is that spike protein, enters into the body, or the recipe for it, and you get one little piece of ingredient to tell you what to do and how to make it, the body creates the spike protein based on these instructions, but then that's it. It can't make anything else because there are no more ingredients and no more instructions to do anything else besides making a little bit of the icing for the cupcake, if you will. Over time, and this is one of those areas where that old school biology comes into place, where you learned about cells and cellular structure. So many of us are so far removed from the biology that we learned in high school that it's important for us in the science field to go back through it, right? Some of us may have not been in the sciences. We may have focused on English and arts and all these things. So to assume that people even remember basic cell biology is, to me, silly. So I like to make sure I've broken it all the way down. We talk about the cell and how things enter into the cell and the fact that there's a nucleus within the cell, because that's the other concern, is that somehow this mRNA is going to penetrate to your DNA. That's a reasonable concern that I've heard people discuss. But we talk about a cell the wall layers of a cell, the cytoplasm, which is the goop inside the cell that holds all the important stuff we need to exist. And within the center of that cell is the nucleus where the DNA is housed and protected. You have to actually do specific measures to penetrate through the nucleus to get to the DNA for any outside genetic material to be able to influence our personal and collective DNA. So I like to address that as one of the first things we talk about. And the second thing is, well, what happens to this mRNA once it's introduced into our cell? Does it float around? Does it go to other places? The beauty of the body is once something like that piece of mRNA is introduced within the cell, when it's recognized as foreign, the body attacks it, annihilates it, and then boots it back out of the cell. So it isn't as if the mRNA component of this vaccine sticks around for a long time. One of the reasons why for both of these vaccines, Pfizer and Moderna, you have to get 2 different doses, is that the body mounts a certain level of immune response. And over time, that immune response goes down, 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 right? And then you get a booster shot to bring that immune response back up, because there has to be a certain level of immune response for the body to, 1, recognize, and then 2, to successfully attack the COVID-19. And to Dr. Nikki's point, even with having the vaccine, there's still a risk when people aren't doing what they're supposed to do. The vaccine is not 100% effective. The end goal for this vaccine was to decrease symptom severity and to decrease the risk of death. As a byproduct of it, we hope that it will prevent COVID-19 cases as well. But what we did not do is expose a bunch of people to COVID to determine whether or not this vaccine at 95% prevented you from getting COVID. Of the 43,000 people in the Pfizer study and the 30-something thousand people in the Moderna study, they followed these people to see who got COVID. Of that 30 to 40-something thousand trial, only 180 people got the COVID-19 infection. And then they looked at those 180 people to see, okay, who got the vaccine and who didn't. That's where the 95% efficacy comes from. It's not looking at the whole 40-something thousand people, but of those who got COVID, who was vaccinated and who wasn't. Of the people who got COVID, 5%, 8 people who were vaccinated ended up with COVID. The other 172 people who got COVID received the placebo. So for people to say that they didn't get a placebo, yes, there was a placebo in the studies, but they looked at specifically in natural exposure who got COVID. They're now looking at exposing people with the vaccine to COVID, because it's dicey, right? You know, if people get COVID, there's a risk of them getting really sick, dying, or having long-term complications. So in terms of patient protections, you better know what you're doing when you willingly allow people to be exposed to COVID to see how well this vaccine actually prevents you from getting it. And that's where we are right now. So I think it's important for people to understand, 1, the science behind it in terms of that cellular technology, but also where we are in terms of what the vaccine actually does.
Hey, Dr. Yola, I have a question from Lucille Short.
Yes.
She says, how long can the spike stay in the body without harming it?
That's a very good question. The spike protein that is made from the vaccine is only there for a little bit of time. It's not like weeks on end the spike protein exists. The spike protein itself, because there isn't anything else for it to do, there's no virus with which it can connect and survive. It's not a live piece of the COVID-19. You have to have all the different components of the virus for it to be alive and replicate. So you're talking a very temporary exposure. You're talking about just a matter of hours, right? But the immune response from the level of spike protein that the body creates is what causes you to have fever, sore arms, muscle aches, feeling like you have a bit of cootie, right? People are like, oh my gosh, is this COVID? No, it's not COVID. It's your body's immune response. You want to have a little bit of achiness. You want to have a little bit of fever because it lets you know that the body is doing what it's supposed to do.
Well, I didn't. And then also, go ahead, Nick. Go ahead, Nick.
Any of that. All I had was a sore arm. I didn't get any symptoms that everybody else got. I had coworkers who were really sick. I didn't. That still does not mean just because you didn't get those symptoms that your body still did not build up an immunity to it. So everybody's different. So I
Absolutely.
want to let that
Absolutely.
be.
Everyone's different. That's a very good point. It's like little ones, right? So in pediatrics, vaccines are part of the core of what I do. Some little ones will roll out of the health center and be good until their next big boy, big girl checkup. Others,
You
I'm
got
getting a call every hour from mommies and daddies because their babies have fever. It really is dependent on your personal system. Two, what we also know is that people who've had COVID before, now we're seeing that they're having more significant side effects from it in terms of fever and muscle soreness and those sorts of things. So there are a variety of factors that influence how your body personally is going to respond.
right.
I saw Frank saying, I saw a comment from him asking or making a statement that if people are vitamin D deficient, are they having more severe effects with COVID-19?
That's an excellent question. What we do know is the role of vitamin D, right? People pay attention to vitamin D in terms of bone health, but vitamin D is just as critical in terms of immune function and heart health. Studies have demonstrated that people who were vitamin D deficient had more severe COVID-19 symptoms and had a higher risk of death associated with COVID-19. As African Americans, we already run the risk of being vitamin D deficient because of our beautifully melanated skin. I recommend that everyone, pediatric patients, children, and grown-ups know what your vitamin D level is to determine whether or not you need to fortify yourself with a vitamin D supplement. A lot of us don't mess with cow's milk anymore. There's this whole plant-based vegan movement that I'm here
Correct.
for. But simultaneously, that's where most of us were getting our vitamin D, right? And so it's important for us to recognize that if you live on the East Coast, it's cold outside right now. We were in COVID indoors at stay-at-home order, so weren't necessarily exposed to the sun as much because even when you ingest vitamin D, it still has to be converted to the activated form of 25-hydroxy vitamin D, which
Wow.
requires sun exposure.
Right.
And I know that
Now
we
that
had
I didn't know. That is, I'm here
yeah.
popping my D3s, so it needs to be activated by the sun. Is that what you're saying?
Right. Now, what you're doing, what you're taking is already the active form. You
Oh,
want to
okay.
take, there's
Okay.
D2 and
Right.
D3.
D2.
When we
Mm-hmm.
eat, we get D2. When
Okay.
we then expose ourselves to the sun, it gets actively converted through our skin to D3. But if you are limited in terms of your vitamin D consumption, if you're limited in terms of sun exposure, then I highly recommend taking a vitamin D3. So
Yeah,
you're
I
right on.
Yes.
You're
oh
doing exactly
good
what you
because
need to.
that there is a cocktail that I'm taking, and I definitely want to run that by you. But I'm definitely doing vitamin C's, D3s, zinc,
Mm-hmm.
sea moss,
Perfect.
and so these things. Some of you may not know that I had been diagnosed years ago with an autoimmune issue, which has me concerned with taking the vaccine because
Right.
it was called Graves' disease, and I'm not claiming it because I am healed in Jesus' name.
I love it.
but
Amen.
but I have been able to through health practices reverse some of those numbers, which I was told would never be able to, right? And so,
Amen.
but I know something called a thyroid storm, and because of that, I'm thinking about what the body is doing, what the vaccine is supposed to do, and I would never want to go into a thyroid storm. So I want you to speak on to that. But before we get into that, well, no, go ahead. We'll organically. I would just love you to speak to that. Anybody who's dealing with autoimmune issues or issues
Right.
out there that those preconditions, what would you tell them?
That's an excellent question, and one I commend you for the regimen that you're on. Not only are you doing the things to boost your immune system, what you're also doing is creating a space that's protected against inflammation. And I think one of the biggest concerns, both in terms of the vaccine as with the infection, is how is inflammation going to be triggered, right? If your immune system is relatively on like if our immune system is on 10,
Right.
and Jackie's is circulating around 50, but because of her excellent regimen, it's down to 10 too. What does that do when you expose the body to COVID-19 vaccine, or if someone with an autoimmune issue acquires COVID-19, one of the things that you have to pay attention to is where you are in terms of your autoimmune space. Where are you in terms of inflammation? What we know is that sugar consumption increases inflammation. Weight, either being overweight or dealing with obesity, increases your risk of inflammation. If you have unmanaged diabetes, it increases your risk of inflammation. So right now is the time to optimize your health with whatever health issue you are dealing with, so that if and when you are ready to get the COVID-19 vaccine, it happens in a space where your immune response is at a 10 and not a 50 or a 100, right? That's what I would tell people, is really pay attention to where you are health-wise. Make sure that you go into the space to get a vaccine at your optimal health, knowing that you're doing everything that you should in terms of supplementation, everything you're doing in terms of nutrition, right? People worry about the ingredients in the vaccine, but will rush to get a Popeye's fish sandwich.
Right.
Right?
Correct.
And we
Exactly.
know
Yeah.
fast food triggers inflammation because of the chemicals in processed foods. So you really, if that's one of your concerns, if autoimmune issues are one of your concerns, one, just rethink how you're approaching food in general to maximize the control. Because I'm a true believer that you do not need to have necessarily thyroid ablation if you have Graves. You don't necessarily need to have Synthroid if you're dealing with Hashimoto's thyroiditis. The first place I would look at is your nutrition and just the wellness of your life, so that if and when you're considering getting the vaccine, you come into it in as healthy a place as you can.
That's amazing.
So Lucille also asked about turmeric and ginger and elderberry. Are those items also good to take?
I take those too.
That's an excellent question. All three of those are excellent herbs. I'm big into herbs. People call me a very granola doctor because I'm into all that good stuff.
That.
It's what our ancestors used as part of their medical healing. Right before Hippocrates, there was Imhotep, and he used all of those herbs and things and trained others like him to train in that way. The only caution, particularly in terms of herbs, is elderberry if you have COVID-19. What we know with COVID-19 is that the infection can trigger cytokine release, right? Cytokines, I call them the hootie hoo of the immune system. They're the ones that shout out to everybody else to show up and show out when there is a foreign invader. What COVID-19 does is increases that cytokine signaling, which then triggers a more robust immune response. What we also know is that elderberry triggers cytokine release to sort of survey our systems to make sure that we are identifying any foreign invaders like bacteria or viruses. What you don't want to do is drink something that increases your cytokine levels when you are infected with something that increases your cytokine levels. So if you suspect that you have been exposed to COVID-19, that would be the only one that I would sort of put on the back burner until you have confirmed that you are negative, and then bring it right on back into your rotation. I drink elderberry with echinacea in a tea every single morning.
That's awesome. And so, I wanted to get into the interview with Dr. Julius because as a frontline worker, as a doctor, we want to see a case of somebody that has been, and he's on now. And so let's get into that interview. Thank you, Dr. Yola. You stay right on.
Dr. Julius, welcome to Say Word. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Nikki. Hi, everyone. How y'all doing? My name is Marquise Julius. I'm a doctor of physical therapy. 3-time graduate, Howard University.
As you said, you have your doctorate. What school did you get your doctorate from?
Howard University, College of Pharmacy, Nursing, and Allied Health Sciences. So I tested positive back in November 2020. I want to say between the first and second week in November, I started having initially just chills. And then it progressed to hot flashes, up and down, night sweats, cold chills. It had progressed about a week later to shortness of breath and achingness and difficulty getting up out of bed. And I tried to wait it out, going through using my natural Caribbean remedies, different tonics and such, making my own beverages. I didn't have it here. I got my hospital issued water bottle, but using what I knew to try to boost my immune system, because as I understand, as much has been released, COVID attacks our immune system, and all the systems all 9 systems of our body. So everyone has a different response. Mine just happened to be respiratory, to the point that I ended up being hospitalized for almost 2 weeks. During that time frame, I had gone in on a nasal cannula and then progressed to high flow oxygen. My highest setting ended up being 80% support, and the next setting after that would have been 100% support, which is either intubation, where they put me to sleep and put a tube in my mouth, or a ventilator, where they cut a slit in my trachea and stick the tube in that way. So, thankfully, by the grace of God and a lot of assistance that I had with my network, my medical director said, whatever you do, don't let them intubate you. Fight it, do what you can. The problem that I was having was not being able to maintain my oxygen saturation. And every time I would speak, every time I would move, it would just drop. So that was the problem I was having. And I was a half night away from being intubated. And that's when it got scary.
Got it. So for people who don't know, normal oxygen should be 95% or above, correct? Especially if you don't have any comorbidities that's going on that will prevent you from being able to achieve that. What numbers were you at that time?
So I had actually dropped, my lowest point was 79%.
Wow.
And I kept staying in the low 80s, 83, 84, teeter-tottering, dipping one time or another to 79, 80. But I couldn't get it past 93. So what they made me do was to start doing a process called proning, where you lay on your stomach to allow your lungs the opportunity to actually recover. Because with COVID, you start with acute respiratory failure, but I started getting pneumonia in both my lungs. So having to go through the pneumonia treatment along with oxygen support, I was maybe 2 days from actually having to go full throttle intubation or 100% ventilator support. Luckily, I went in that Friday, I believe it was the 13th or the 14th, and recovered enough for them to feel comfortable with giving me an extra night of laying on my stomach or laying on my side and allowing my body to recover.
Throughout this whole ordeal, what were you doing to keep your spirits up? I know I would text you from time to time to make sure you're okay. When I found out that you were actually in the hospital, what was going through your mind at this time? Were you praying more? Were you what was actually going through your mind?
Yeah, definitely leaning on every prayer warrior and family and friend support that I could. I didn't want to make it a public situation at the time that I was in the hospital. I refrained from sharing any of that information because I didn't want.
That's the first half. This was a really great interview, and I just wanted to play. We're gonna play some more throughout. This time went by so quickly. Dr. Yola, I mean, you just have been breaking it down and giving us so much great information. And so we're gonna. I would love to get back into his story, but is this normal? You know what people are dealing with COVID.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I watered up just looking at him and here, like that's a testimony, right? That's truly a testimony. The fact that he was on the edge of needing to be on vent support, and we know that there's only a 20% survival for individuals who end up on a ventilator. So the fact that he was in a protected space, because as Black people, we don't always get to advocate for ourselves and learn about all of these modalities to allow us to not just survive but thrive through it.
But his
Right.
experience is a very common story that not only have I heard in terms of the work that I do, but I've experienced with my family, with loved ones. I've lost family members to COVID. I've lost friends to COVID. The stats are now that 1 in 3 African Americans has a loved one who's died from COVID compared to 10% of whites. And so clearly,
Mm-hmm.
not only are we disproportionately impacted by COVID-19 infections and death, but from a loss standpoint, 33% of us are losing loved ones compared to
Exactly.
10% of our white counterparts. And the fact that we have to stay ahead and be able to advocate for ourselves. So I hope listeners understand if and when a family member or yourself is in the hospital, you push, you kick, you fight to make sure the hospital is doing what they need to prevent you from being ventilated. It isn't that you refuse it, but you ask critical questions. What do I need to do for my body? You heard my brother talk about how he treated himself. He went back old school and did some Caribbean ways of healing, right? You tap into what your grandmama taught you. Pull out the castor oil and the cod liver oil, because
For
those
real.
things, they
Yeah.
knew what they were doing. Even though the
Mhm.
science may poo-poo some of that stuff, you better pull out your herbs and all
Yes.
that good
Yeah.
stuff. But
Right.
then also recognizing and paying attention to what you need to do when you are progressing. There are a couple of things I tell everyone in their household to have. One is a thermometer. Unless you have kids, most grown-ups don't have a thermometer in their house. Number two,
Yes.
especially in the face of COVID, have a pulse oximeter. It's that small little machine you put on your finger to read your oxygen level. You want it at 94 or greater. And don't wait. Don't put it on and be like, oh my gosh, it's 92. Give it a minute. Let the waveform take place. You'll see your heart rate and your oxygen level. Go to Amazon, whatever your place is that you get your stuff. No shout out to Amazon, wherever you get your stuff. Go get an oximeter so that if a loved one or you have COVID, you can monitor your symptoms. That's what I did for each of my loved ones. I send out what's called a COVID care plan, getting a pulse ox and all these things. Order it now. Don't wait until you have it, and then you got to wait 3 days for it to get
Exactly.
delivered. The second thing is know what to ask for. What is my loved one's oxygen level? What's your threshold for putting him or her on a ventilator? And what are you doing to avoid it? When are you going to start them on dexamethasone, remdesivir? I use these words so that you will have them. You don't even need to know what the medicines do, but know to ask for them. When are you starting remdesivir? When are you starting dexamethasone? And when are we going to consider monoclonal antibody treatment? Those are some of the
Yeah.
critical layers if and when a loved one is hospitalized that a hospital needs to know to do. Are they going to give your loved one vitamin supplements, right? You don't want to be in the hospital not really eating and not giving the body what it needs to be well equipped to fight the infection. Medications only do so much if the body itself is
Yes.
not empowered to do what God designed it to do.
Correct.
Amen.
I don't know if we're going to be able to play it, but Dr. Julius was also talking about how he's still suffering from side
Yes,
effects from
that was the
COVID.
next clip I would love
Right.
to. I would love to
I didn't
play
know.
that
Sure.
really
Go
quick.
for it.
Yeah,
I didn't
yeah.
know if you were
All
it or
right.
not, but yeah.
Okay.
20, but it was just this time in November that it caught me.
Got it. So, do you actually still have any symptoms that you're battling after beating COVID?
Yeah, so it was actually most recently that I stopped having the labored breathing with doing cardio. Like Dr. Mickey said, I have twin boys. There'll be 8 in a couple weeks. They're very active, very energetic, very playful, and I try to stay with them as much as possible to engage and participate in things that they are involved in. But I couldn't. It, you know, 5 minutes at a time here and there, 10 minutes, and then slowly but surely, I was able to start being able to play with them a lot longer. I was able to get on a bike with my twins and ride to a service project. And that was the first time I had been on the bike since having COVID, and it was surprising to me to be able to keep up with them and to even sometimes pass them. But what was eye-opening and enlightening to me was that I didn't have that pressure in my chest. I didn't have that taste of blood in the back of my throat. I didn't need to tell them, hey, I need to take a break or anything like that. And I was able to keep pushing. And when I got out the hospital, it was difficult for me to, and I got out the day before Thanksgiving, difficult for me to go up and down the stairs. My legs hurt. I was scared to go down the stairs because my legs did not feel like they were strong enough to keep me from falling. So not very often have I ever had to use a handrail, but I had to use the handrail to just go down my own steps. And that was scary for me. And so I knew at that point I had to start doing things for myself to build my cardio back up and push it and try as much as I could to make sure that I don't stay in a stagnant place. In order to get pneumonia out, you have to force it out. You have to breathe heavy and take the antibiotics that were given. So I did all of that just by doing basic things, from cooking to cleaning to getting up, going to take a shower. In the hospital, it was so difficult just to roll from my back to my side. I had to mentally prepare myself. And when I got to my side, it was at that point that I was almost hyperventilated, breathing so fast because I couldn't catch my breath. That's how bad it was. And I wasn't able to go to use the bathroom in the hospital, like walk to the bathroom until about 3 days before being discharged. And I was there for almost 2 weeks. So it was a humbling experience working with patients who are in that space to now be the patient in that space.
So I do have a question.
Whew.
Yeah.
Wow. Went from working to actually being one of the patients. It's interesting. I have a question, Dr. Yola. Someone said they heard that if you get the COVID symptoms and it's not as bad, you can ask if you're a candidate for an antibody cocktail. They said some hospitals carry it but won't inform you of it. Does this really help? Is it really available?
That's an excellent question. And yes, the monoclonal antibody treatment is what the viewer is referring to. And you can get that on an outpatient basis, but like it's like the best kept secret, right? Again, it goes back to access and how well communicated are these resources, particularly in Black communities. I have white colleagues who have a list of places where folks in Virginia can go. But I live out in Maryland in Prince George's County, and it's only by word of mouth that you know where to go to get these sorts of treatments. And my question is, why isn't this publicly available? There should be, and I think that's one of the, in terms of locally and federally, one of the areas for significant improvement is making access more streamlined. If I have COVID and it's mild, plan A, and this is where you go get your resources, monoclonal antibody treatment, vitamins, whatever. And then plan B, for those who have more severe symptoms who end up in the hospital, what should I expect? The challenge is that we don't have that information out as publicly as we should.
Wow,
So is it like appropriate to have those conversations with your primary care physicians, or who are you going to for that information? Because I feel like, when we have questions, typically, our primary care is the first person we go to, and they provide referrals or resources and information. But it seems like with COVID, no one really knows exactly where they're going to ask the questions.
That's such a good point. One would hope that your primary care provider could be your first source of information, but I will admit to you now, even for us, sometimes we get kept in the dark, particularly for this pandemic. It's been the most interesting and frustrating experience as a physician in the middle of this pandemic that I know no more or less than everyone else, right? But it is also our responsibility, like especially here in Maryland, in my part of Maryland, I'm looking at where can people go get the vaccine? Where can they go to get monoclonal antibodies? What do they need to do in terms of their immune support as it relates to eating and supplements, so that I am a trusted source of information? It's one of the reasons why I do that weekly Facebook Live, is to make sure that nationally, like everybody knows what's going on, but also to be a source. If someone wants to know, I get text messages every single day asking, my loved one is in the hospital, what should the protocol be? I just have COVID and it's mild, where can I get this antibody treatment? So I try my best to be a source of information. And I think even in the midst of being a frontline healthcare worker, as primary care providers, we should also take on that role because it's usually the first place where people turn to.
Wow.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you so
Dr.
much.
Yola, I have a question for you. I sense that you have a relationship with God or your creator. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
So my question to you is, when do you go with God versus medicine? With making
I
a
go
decision
with
with something.
Right. It's always a combination of both, right? So
Question.
there's this notion of the art and science of medicine. I throw in a third element. There's the God in medicine. We'd
Yes.
be on here all night telling you stories where a child presented with X, but when the Holy Spirit spoke to me, I
Spoke
pray
to you.
for and with and over my patients. And this little
Yes.
2-year-old came in, and everyone had diagnosed him with gastroenteritis, but the Holy Spirit spoke to me and said, this little baby has appendicitis. And he was very stoic, no crying, no nothing. I told his parents, take him to the ER. The ER got ready to punt him out. I said, when you get there, they're going to want to send you home. Call me. I talked to the doctor. I said, what would it hurt to just draw a lab and do an ultrasound?
Wow.
They decided to wait. He had appendicitis and it ruptured. And so that was one of my first experiences of really knowing that it's important for me to pray. Every single day I'm in prayer. Like today I fasted. Today I fasted. I fasted because we hit 500,000 people who've died. And so I need to fast so that I have the wisdom, the insight, so that collectively we have the wisdom and insight as a people to be able to be guided. For me professionally, I need to fast every once in a while to be able to stay directly connected to God so that every single day I'm practicing in a way that He would want me to practice. But I love you, Dr. Nikki, for asking that question because for those of us who are spiritual, it's so critically important for us to stay connected to
Extremely.
our spiritual. Absolutely. It's there's no option.
There's no
None.
option.
No
Oh.
option. No.
And Dr. Yola, let me tell you something. I need everyone on this line to contact you because I cannot keep you all to myself. It is unfair for me to get the kind of caring information, informative, passionate, the way that you deliver information that can save lives. So can you please, Candace, I know you have some questions. Do you have some questions? I know this. I want this
Oh
to
no,
go on another hour.
I'm getting
Okay.
I got my questions in.
Okay, good. Because there's so many questions that I do have, and I feel like there has to be a part two or something. Questions from the controversy whether this vaccine has caused HIV. To those, I don't know if that's a myth or if that is
Right.
Questions to fertility and hearing some reports that it has stopped some people's cycles, some women's cycles. So I don't know if you can touch on that really quick, but I want to also make sure you tell everybody where they can find you and your website and all that other stuff.
Sure. So the first thing I'll do is talk a little bit about the concerns about reproductive issues, right? So one of the things that we have to think about is how does COVID-19 impact us, and then how does the vaccine impact us, and then what we need to know in a long-term period. Anyone who makes a claim that COVID-19 vaccines impair fertility are talking out of myth and misfacts. We have not had enough time for the vaccine to have been studied, for data to be collected in order to know whether or not there are any impacts on either female or male reproduction. What we do know is that COVID-19 itself actually shows up in sperm. That's what we do know. What we also know is that pregnant women are at increased risk of complications and death as it relates to COVID-19 infection, both in terms of the inflammation caused by COVID and because of the risk of blood clots that COVID is associated with. And so again, it goes back to that risk versus benefit. And the good doctor, he talked about those long-term complications from COVID. So you have to really think about what we know about the COVID-19 infection and how it will impact our health as time progresses. We are a year out, and we know that people who were infected back in February are still dealing with complications this February, right? We won't
Right.
know if there are any long-term implications from the COVID-19 vaccine until some time has progressed. But what I will tell you is that every vaccine that I have recommended in the pediatric space, and you guys know as parents, there are a lot of them. There has yet to be a study with the basic vaccines that have been put out that it has affected long-term fertility. There's so many other foods, beverages, environmental triggers that on a daily basis we voluntarily and actively engage in exposing our bodies to, that until you start correcting all of those, what we call endocrine disruptors, until you address those, you can't really put all that weight on the COVID-19 vaccine. And we can certainly talk about all the endocrine disruptors that folks eat and drink and smoke on a regular basis. That's going to far increase your risk of infertility more so than any vaccine that's been on the market to date.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Lucille Short is asking, would you recommend the vaccine for children? If yes, how young?
That's an excellent question. So both Pfizer and Moderna are currently in trials looking at the vaccine between the ages of 12 to 16 or 12 to 18 or 12 to 17, because for Pfizer, they did studies starting at the age of 16, and Moderna's previous vaccine trial started incorporating people as young as 18. When the vaccine is available and it has been out, I will approach it in the same way that I'm doing now. There has to be a significant portion of the population, at least 10% of children who've received it before I can safely and effectively say to get it. There have been two previous vaccines that I held out on, rotavirus and the meningococcal vaccine, when they first came out, because the side effects in the vaccinated population were more significant than the general population. The vaccines were both taken off the market, re-envisioned, and then put back on. I still waited. And now we can safely recommend those vaccines because we do not see those same high levels of risk factors. And it'll be the same approach that I take with the COVID-19 vaccine. What we do know is that children aren't as impacted by COVID as us adults, right? But what we also know is that the older a child is, the higher the risk of things like the multi-system inflammatory syndrome. So we have to think about what the risk is, not just to our children in terms of those complications, but also what are the risks to adults who either cannot or choose not to be inoculated with the COVID-19 vaccine. When it's proven to be safe and a sufficient number have been put out, my little one will be signed up to get the COVID-19 vaccine as well, because I also have to weigh the risk. We know that over 80% of children who've died from COVID have been Black and brown children. The majority of children in the hospital have been Black and brown children. So we have to weigh those risks as well.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
This was such a great conversation. I see in the comments they're saying yes. Tia was like, part 2, yes.
Yes.
Everybody's saying yes. I see Shirley asking, how much vitamin D do I need to take?
That's an excellent question. It really depends on your level, right? The standard normal dosing of vitamin D without having vitamin D deficiency is between 400 to 800 international units. But how much vitamin D you need to take is based on your gender, your age, and your current vitamin D level. If you are vitamin D deficient, you should take around 4,000 international units. My attorney would tell me to tell you that this is not to treat or diagnose, but to just give recommendations. But there are some specific recommendations in terms of boosting your immune system to protect against COVID. And as a standard, that's around 4,000 international units twice a day. Vitamin D is a very tricky one in that you want to take it towards the evening. There's something called chronobiology, the timing in which you take medications and supplements. Vitamin D, omega-3s are those kinds of supplements that you want to take in the evening when your liver is at rest. And certainly if there's a part 2, we can go through all of the supplements and the dosing recommendations just in terms of good immune system function, and also if you're fighting off COVID.
Yeah, we have a lot of questions, and I think it would be really beneficial. Yes.
We have to do a part 2, family. Listen, I want you to share this broadcast. I didn't even get to say that. I usually say that all through. Share. But listen, the great thing about social media technology, you're able to rewatch. If there's something that you missed, you're able to watch the broadcast. You're able to tag people right now as we're speaking, and they can watch the broadcast. They can type in replay. Also, Dr. Yola, I want to put the end of Dr. Julius's interview so people can find him as well. But I did put up your Ask Doctor. Wait, hold on. I just want to make sure I'm saying it right. AskYola.com. And so
Right.
I want you to give everybody your information, but I'm going to play this last clip, and then we're going to get back to the panel.
Parameters in place to keep us protected. And the wash your hands part, in my opinion, is the most important part of it. Because you can go outside and not wear a mask and be fine, but the minute you touch a surface like a handrail to go down the stairs of the park, and somebody who already had that touch that handrail, and then you go touch your phone and you put your phone to your face and you go get back in your car, now you spread it from that park to your home. So washing your hands, sanitizing your surfaces, especially your phone, because that's the one thing that we touch the most.
Yes, we do.
Making sure that there's a transition from outside to inside. Your inside should be your sanctuary, your castle. You want to protect it at all costs. So having, the different forms of virus and germ and infection protection in place is, in my opinion, what's necessary. So
tell us quickly a little bit about Rehab DC, and that's where you're currently at, correct?
Yeah, so Rehab DC is actually my IG handle. Anyone who wants to follow my professional page is Rehab, REHAB_DC. I work in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. I'm a traveling therapist. I'm a independent contractor, subcontractor, wellness, mobile wellness, giving people the proper care that they need and deserve without the red tape of insurance and the need for a referral from doctors. So shout out to Dr. Nikki and Morgan Taylor Scrubs. I'm waiting for the men's line. I could be your male model there.
It's coming this spring. And thank you again. Thank you for all the support. And from two Black doctors to everybody else, thank you. And this is great. And Say Word is the place to be.
Say word.
Say word. That was great, Nikki. That was great, Dr. Nikki.
Thank you for that interview, Dr.
Really,
Nikki.
Dr.
Yola,
great job.
We cannot get off this board. You have given us so many gems. In the line of what we do here at Amplify, I pray that your territory is increased. I pray that more comes in than goes out. I pray that your life is blessed. I pray that you and your children are covered in the blood, in Jesus' name. Listen, I pray that the Holy Spirit just guides you, because what you have given our viewers has been so important for their next steps and going into these next phases of we thought we would be out of this pandemic already, right?
Right.
And so we need trusted professionals, trusted health professionals to help us get the information we need to make sound decisions. So please let everyone know where they can find you, how they can contact you. I'm going to put up your information, your website information, but I know that there's more information that you can give.
Absolutely. So on all social media platforms, you can find me at Ask Dr. Yola, AskDrYola. My website is also askdryola.com. On the website, you can actually connect with me. You can shoot me a message either through text or through email with any questions that you may have, just so that we can stay connected. You know, one of the sort of parting words that I would tell folks is when to mask up. That is going to be the most important part of protecting ourselves against COVID, because we know 80% of COVID-19 transmission is through respiratory droplets. And two, as the good doctor said, make sure that you're washing your hands, because we inadvertently touch our faces all the time throughout the day. And then the third is to continue some of these other public health practices, maintaining a tight COVID circle and social distancing at least 6 feet.
That is amazing. I was here when
Absolutely.
I saw your website. I wanted to make sure that you have a beautiful site, and so everybody needs to go and check Ask Yola. And so I want to
Yeah,
make
either if you
this.
put in either Ask Yola or Ask Dr. Yola, it shows up in the same location. I wanted to make sure I owned all my stuff.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yes, I know
You
that's
gotta
right,
be a
Dr.
good
Yola.
businesswoman. Okay. Come on.
Yes.
And so
That's
Dr.
right.
Nikki
Yes.
and Dr. Yola, you guys are gonna have to talk because Nikki has a scrub line.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
yes, she has a scrub
I
line.
love it.
Yes.
Yes.
Family, continue
Yes.
to share this broadcast.
Yes.
We love you. We love you. We love you.
Yes.
Thank you so much
Thank
for joining
you,
us
thank
here
you.
on
Thank you.
Amplified
Yes.
Network. Share, share, share. This information is so important. You will be surprised how many of us might not know this important information that goes into our next phase of our lives. So
Yes,
thank you,
absolutely.
you guys. This is a great interview. You're gonna have to be on every week with us.
Yes.
This is great. Oh
Let's
my
go.
goodness. I love it. I love it. I love the energy and I love the information. Thank you guys. Have a great Monday.
Thank
Have a
you,
blessed
guys.
week. Make
Thank
sound
you, audience.
decisions.
Thank you,
Yes.
everybody, for joining us.
Yes.
Love it.
Facebook,
We love you
YouTube,
guys.
Instagram. We love you guys.